And at some points, one of us said, "Well, we could do a podcast." And for us, that's what it's been. We do try and stick to an idea, but we ramble all over the place, and our small little listenership, if they're loyal to us, is because they somehow like that rambling, rather than I'm going to plug in, download information, and go on my happy way, more efficiently equipped to do this thing. We hope it's a change of heart. We hope it's a growth of the mind and soul rather than just a information download.
I don't think that there's a way to have a good conversation if you are not reserving room for the rabbit trails.
Yep.
I think that that's sort of one of the inherent characteristics to a good conversation. So if in a podcast or even a classroom conversation or whatever kind of conversation it is, if you're not reserving room for that or allowing for that to happen, then I think you're kind of, maybe you're missing the point of conversation.
Well, my students enjoy, when they don't know me well, I see in their eyes, because I've been doing this a while, the delight of maybe we can get him off topic by introducing some rabbit trail.
Yeah.
And over time, they get frustrated. I don't think frustrated is the right term. They get foiled with the fact that, doggone it, Elliot thinks everything has to do with everything. And so somehow the conversation can't be taken somewhere he doesn't mind going. And that is the fun of conversation, is that when I have a good conversation and then try and go back over in my mind the road traveled, it's not A to B, at least not in a straight line. It's a wandering thing, and I think that's a wonderful thing.
It's interesting because when I interview people about books they've written or something like that, I don't send them questions ahead of time. I usually don't plan for. I'll write down a few notes and I'll think really hard about where I want to start. Like, what's the first question I want to ask? But I try not to create in my head. I find for me that if I write out 10 questions, I instinctively sort of use it as a crutch. And then always I'm trying to push the conversation back to the questions that I'd written down ahead of time. And usually that, more often than not, that's not really the direction that the interviewee wants to go. Or it's, most of the time, the questions that I'm going to write down end up just being the questions that they're probably getting asked in every interview they do. Whereas if we kind of let the show or the conversation follow, or let our curiosities guide the conversation, it tends to be better, and they tend to have more energy than if they kind of feel like it's just a sort of rote interview where I'm just, all right, next question, moving on. That I think a lot of times guests who do a lot of media for something like a book that they wrote or some project they're doing or something, they feel that and they kind of get tired of it. And when you allow that, when you kind of purposefully allow space for the rabbit trail, interviewees tend to like that. I think because they have to be a little bit more creative and on their toes.
Yeah, well, and can say something a little different than the last 10 interviews.
Exactly. Yeah,
that's right. Stringfellow Barr, who was a tutor at St. John's College for years, had these 9 rules of good dialectic or dialogue, and one of them was his rule of Bedlam, that a really good seminar sometimes was indistinguishable from chaos. and I agree with that. I think that the best classes and the best podcasts we've had is when, Jason will occasionally ask, "Where's the Bedlam? When's it going to?" You can't manufacture it. It just happens, and yet it's wonderful when it does.